So I guess the takeaway is be on the front end. Get your trademarks and be the enforcer, not the enforcee.
Right.
If you're starting a new brewery, do your due diligence and get your trademarks first. Because I think some of that process bakes in reviewing and making sure you're not using anybody else's mark, and you're not going to get that letter and spend all that money to change your brand.
We had a local restaurant that for a brief time they wanted us to do a private label for their restaurant, and I won't say which restaurant. Great place, great guys, but they had a concept and they wanted to call it something loco for Loudoun County, and it's like, Four Loko is a beverage, right? Like no, you can't use loco, and I think that basically killed it for me. They were really intent on calling this product like loco something, and I was like, well, we're gonna have to own it. We're gonna have to trademark it,
and you're gonna
that's never gonna happen, right? We were gonna put out a product called Gray Ghost at one time, right? And that's too close to Gray Goose, right? Gray Ghost is the nickname for John Mosby, and but it's too close. It's too close.
Welcome back to the BlackLetter podcast. We set out to create an entertaining and exciting podcast about law and business, and I think we've done it. BlackLetter, the name, comes from the Gothic typeset that was originally used in the Gutenberg press. Over time, BlackLetter became the only font that English law books were printed in. Everything else was printed in regular type. It made it harder for kind of the common person to understand what the English law book said. BlackLetter came to represent something that was law, that was set in stone, that was the sort of old and a well-settled fundamental principle of law. We're here to demystify BlackLetter law. We're here to demystify things that happen in business and law and where those two meet. And I hope you have fun listening. I'm your host for BlackLetter, Tom Dunlap. Today with me, I've got Scott Harris of Catoctin Creek Distilling and Chris Suarez of Bear Chase Brewing. Briefly about Scott. So Scott was an engineer, a defense contractor, IT software engineer. He and his wife both, and they gave up that life for something that they found more fun. And I think on this podcast, you've heard from some of our defense contracting people before, but today we're going to hear from what happens in life after that. And then Chris grew up in the hospitality industry and became the general manager of Bear Chase Brewing. Really neat. Today, we're going to talk about the challenges in starting a alcohol-focused business, everything from ABC licenses to trademark wars to just what happens in startup on the business side of things, the challenges and the kind of the fun part of it as well. And we may have partway through the podcast, Matt Hagerman from Lost Rhino join us, where Chris used to work. And Chris mentioned also was a home brewer before he became the general manager at Bear Chase and used to work for Matt at Lost Rhino. Matt right now is either very short or invisible, but he did text and will join us in the podcast in a little bit. So with that, Scott, why don't we start with you? So your distillery, Catoctin Creek, and I think you brought some sample bottles. Yep. If we had some shot glasses, maybe we can
some of those.
We should sample that. So tell us a little bit about Catoctin Creek, and you started a long time ago. I know Dunlap, Bennett, and Ludwig helped you with the money and the trademarks and some of that stuff, but tell us about Catoctin Creek right now. What do you guys do?
So we are 10 years in. So we started in 2009 now, and we have kind of grown organically since we've done that. We started out just selling in the Virginia ABC system. Virginia is a control state, so it means the state government controls all liquor. Sales and distribution. So we started out selling there and then grew into the DMV area, DC, Maryland. And today we are in 26 states and we are selling in about 5 countries internationally as well.
So, that brings up a really interesting question that I've talked to a lot of other distillers and brewers and people about. You have a physical location, right? You have a place where people can go and taste and buy.
Yeah, because we actually make our product, unlike some companies out there that just contract a label and put out a brand. So we actually make the product and you come see that product being made.
So you guys are truly distillers as opposed to branders and labelers. And there's a difference.
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about that difference. What do these branders do?
Oh, there's a lot. I mean, the tradition of blending bottling and just having a brand label, there are large companies that will either sell you bulk whiskey that's ready to go and you just stick it in a bottle.
Okay.
And that's obviously much cheaper than making it yourself. Or there are companies that simply contract an entire concept. Okay, here's my label design, here's a bottle design, and then they'll produce it like in a place in Michigan and distribute it from there. And the company itself is really not much more than an office.
So they don't actually they don't taste and develop the...
They might, yeah. So let's say if it's some kind of exotic liqueur, they might have a recipe and they give that recipe then and have some packaging company then puts it together.
And then they contract distill, if you will.
Right, exactly.
Matt Hagerman's joined us in the podcast. Matt is founder and creator of the Lost Rhino Brewery and brand and Lost Rhino Retreat associated restaurants. He's joined us, Scott Harris and Chris Suarez from Bear Chase and Catoctin Creek. We were just talking with Scott about Catoctin Creek and how the label has gone from something local and something that's distributed in Virginia under ABC stores and then Maryland and DC to 26 states and all over the country distribution. And I was leading up to a question. Scott was telling us about how some people don't actually themselves make their own distilled product. And it's true with beer as well. They give a recipe to a big brewer or distiller, and then they label it, slap a label on it, and sell it as a brand. But Scott makes it himself. And I was leading up to the next piece, Scott, so the profit, the business side of this, to me, it seems like, and also I've with Lost Rhino too, the experience there, that when you distribute beyond the kind of zone of where your place is, where your distillery is or your brewery is, that's when it really starts to become more profitable. You can leverage your brand a lot better. I don't know. I'm saying that as from the law side.
For us, there's no real profit benefit. We don't get more money by distributing it out of state. In some cases, there's other things like freight costs and things that we have to bear that so that the price is sort of uniform across the country. So if you want it in San Francisco, but you've got to ship it all the way over to San Francisco, you've got to factor in the freight cost, because if you don't, then the distributor is going to factor it in, right? And then your price is going to go up. And when you're in San Francisco, a $50 bottle might be $60 over there, and maybe you don't want that to be the case.
I see.
So, but there's other reasons for wanting to be in San Francisco. In other words, selling more volume, right? Like maybe we're selling as much as we can sell in this area, and there's other markets clamoring for the product. And so those are the kinds of things that we consider when we go out there.
Okay. So have you faced capacity challenges in the demand?
We're constantly always sort of dealing with how much are we producing and how much are we selling, right? And so we have in our business, we definitely have a top end of our capacity, but we haven't reached it. And so what Becky typically does, Becky is my chief distiller. She's the president of our company, and she's the one that makes all the whiskey. And what she typically does is we have revenue forecasts for, say, the next year, right? And Becky usually tries to produce about 10% more than what we're revenue forecasting.
Okay.
And so we've got a big warehouse filled with barrels of whiskey, right? And so what that provides us, I'll use a software analogy, is it provides us a buffer, right? And we can draw down on that buffer when there's a surge, right? So when in 2018 in January, we added 10 states all at once, almost doubling our footprint. It was really hard on the system, right? Because there's all kinds of bottling and stuff that has to happen. And what we were able to do is draw down on that reserve and then boost production on the back end to get it back up, working harder than we normally do to get it back up and deal with that surge. So that gives us some flexibility in the model. What we learned going in, one of our first challenges going in as a naive, never before been a distiller, and this is a mistake made by lots and lots of distillers, is if you understand distillation of whiskey, you have to age it, right? So you've got to sit on this product for years before you can sell it. And so most people who aren't infinitely wealthy just start going crazy, and we were doing it too. Getting grain, making whiskey, putting it in the barn. Getting grain, making whiskey, putting it in the barn.
I see.
And you can go broke.
Oh, I've got to store that stuff for years and age it.
It is liquid money, right? You're taking money out of your bank and you're putting it into the barn. And it's fungible, but you have to sell it. Like, it's not easily fungible. And so we realized, holy crap, like we can't just put away infinite whiskey. We're not rich enough to do that. And so you've got to balance the revenue, the sales with the amount you're producing.
So would you say your engineering background
totally
helped with that?
Totally. And both Becky and me. So Becky's background is in manufacturing engineering as a chemical engineer.
Okay.
So that is just like, that's the wheelhouse we're in. Like, she's brilliant at what we do. And then my engineering background, I designed all of our computer systems, and I was also a process engineer. So, we're ISO nothing, but we use that knowledge.
You're essentially ISO, the only ISO distillery.
We are. I am proud to say ISO 0, right?
Right.
Nothing like
You don't have to do ISO 9000.
We don't have to do all that BS, but we use the best of those practices to do things repeatably. We have work procedures. We have practices and policies and things like that.
So Matt, it strikes me that some of the things that Scott was talking about in the distilling world, in the brewing world. So Lost Rhino has been around about as long as Catoctin Creek. I think you both about 10 years.
Kind of started
we actually
time,
about the same time.
That's
we
right.
actually a long time ago we competed in a business plan competition. I don't know if you remember that back.
Yeah, you guys won.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was, but but we had to go up and give our little speech and everything, and it was fun. But we were all there together actually back in the.
And I think today you two are the biggest breweries and distilleries, at least regionally,
in Loudon for sure.
For now,
for now, at least the locals.
Locals.
Not talking AB InBev or like Jim Beam, right? But at least owners and makers of your own product locally. So Matt, Scott was talking about distribution and out of state distribution issues and capacity issues. It strikes me that you've faced some of those same challenges in your business in brewing. Has that differed from kind of Matt's experience a little bit, or is it similar to it?
From Scott's, yeah.
Or Scott's?
Yeah, I think that, no, not really. I think that the fundamentals of the economics are about the same because, as you go farther and farther away from the brewery or the point of where it's made, you're starting to eat into the margins that you ultimately want to make.
Right.
And that gets lost in freight usually. And what we've done is that, we've had to work with specific states on like what we want the price line to be, because like Scott said, like by the time the product gets to the shelf, it could be way out of where the price line needs to be.
So can I ask both of you guys something? And I'll come back to Chris in a second, because what I'd be interested in after I ask you this is whether or not you have advice for Bear Chase, 8 months old, right, and just starting to brew. But could you, just off the top of my head, set up a contract distillery or another distribution point where you could save on freight, or are the logistics and costs of doing that outweighed by the value?
It's a business case, right?
Okay.
I mean, so theoretically, yes, right? But if you're going to plop down a new brewery or a new distillery, you're talking minimum at least $2 million, right? So it's like, okay, is that the smartest way? I want to spend $2 million in this business,
sure,
right? Is my biggest challenge getting 30,000 bottles of whiskey to San Francisco? No, not right now, right? I can get,
but
less
in
bottles.
5 years, maybe you set up distribution point in California.
But
or
if you look at it, it's actually not very common in the whiskey industry, because in the whiskey industry, it's all about sense of place, right? I mean, Jim Beam comes from Kentucky, right? It doesn't come from Arkansas. It doesn't come from a California distillation center,
right?
Gotcha. There's a terroir associated with it. And usually with whiskey, a family story associated with it too. So when we market this product, we are marketing, this is a Virginia whiskey made by the Harris family.
In Virginia.
Shipped
in
from Purcellville.
I got
Shipped from Virginia. The grain comes from Virginia. And so
that's the story of the flavor, right? And the story.
Our biggest benefit, you would lose that if we started doing it in Seattle.
So that's important. So I guess the other question I have is about spoilage. It seems like whiskey doesn't spoil beer.
Yeah,
has
we don't
a
have
born-on
that
day.
Yeah,
the same flexibility. Yeah. So that seems like an additional challenge.
Yeah, and I think with breweries in general, I absolutely agree with that. I think that there is a place, where the ultimate product comes from and the story that drives that. And I think, especially with whiskeys, I think people are willing to pay a premium for that story and where it comes from. They know it's coming from like you or Woodford Reserve, or they know where it's actually happening. And we try to emulate that with our brands as well. I think that, we've attempted contract brewing, but, with that being said, because we've had capacity challenges over at the brewery, and with that being said, though, I personally like to have my finger on the pulse of all the product that's going out the door.
Right.
And with having sort of an intermediate, somebody else that's producing, you don't necessarily have that same quality control that you would like to have normally that you have in-house. So what we've done is we tried contract brewing for a little bit, but then we pulled it back in-house because we really couldn't quantify the quality that we
couldn't manage the quality when it was out of your hands.
It was sort of out of our hands. And I didn't like that factor at all. I was willing to sort of take the beating on not having enough product and making sure that it was the right quality going out.
So would you say that I guess the beer could be brewed? I know there's a big brewery in Richmond that is a California brand. I can't remember the name of it off the top. Stone. Yeah, Stone IPA. So they're a California beer, but they very successfully set up another brewery for their California beer. And that's about what the label on the bottle and the taste of the beer in the bottle, probably less so than the story. This is just what I'm taking away from
Agreed.
the way.
Yeah.
Is that, do you think that's, so is that where kind of distilling and brewing, maybe there's a dividing line in the,
Stone
in
had
the business sense?
Stone, before they came here, though, had a very big, or lots of distribution points already. So what they were trying to do is, again, cut down their expenses because it was eating into their margins, shipping it from California to here. So Sierra Nevada did the same thing. All those guys tried to jump to the East Coast, really to, again, have control over all of the product that they have going out into the market. But they were also very well placed in the market before they came.
Yeah, I think Yuengling does it too.
Yeah,
I mean,
Yuengling,
I think when you get to be one of the bigger sort of national brands, it's less about that story and more about just nobody
Getting
cares
it out
where
to
your
people.
Bud Light is made, right?
Right. Which
Right?
is true. It's absolutely
nobody
true.
cares
They
about
do
that.
care if it has corn syrup, apparently.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I don't know. Did you guys hear that 2 Thursdays ago, Miller filed suit?
Yeah.
And it was interesting because they never say, Miller came out and said there's no corn syrup in the bottle and the yeast eats the corn syrup and it's not high fructose corn syrup. Right. But apparently the commercial gave the consuming public the impression that A, it was high fructose corn syrup, and B, that it was in the bottle, even though they never said it. So their attorneys were very careful. And apparently the FCC law, I think this is we did a little blog on this. The FCC law is that what is the consumer impression?
Sure.
I walked away thinking there was corn syrup in Miller. I was like, they put corn syrup in beer?
I knew that it was a fermented thing, right?
Yeah.
So it's getting turned into alcohol. But the commercial was definitely trying to scare people. Like it was pure scare tactics. Nothing else. Right.
I mean, it sounds like it worked because they
filed
filed
oh my God, corn syrup.
Yeah.
Is there gluten in there too? Like, oh, geez.
Yeah.
Right. No, it's so I think that with that being said, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for like brands of ours to really help identify our markets and then grow from there, and make sure that things like that don't get, spun out of control of something that really isn't happening is happening.
So looking at Bear Chase 8 months in, right? And you guys, I know, just got your trademarks done. You've just gotten your liquor license. You've had your first tremendously huge gangbuster weekend recently as we get into the spring this last weekend. I heard from Chris.
Congrats.
So, which is fantastic. So what questions would you have for these two? I'll call you guys veterans, veterans of the alcohol industry and distribution industry. And I mean, you're a veteran of the hospitality industry, and I used to work for Matt.
I did, and Matt's been a great resource. And so, I mean, that's what the great thing with the brewery industry as a whole, especially in our area. It's such a family relationship. It's not his versus Miller versus Bud Light, and we're not going to do these commercials out there for him.
Right.
I mean, we have our Facebook page that we ask, hey, we need the supplies, we need this and that, and so and other breweries will help out, and so it's really a nice little community. And Matt's always been a big supporter of me since leaving Los Reno in January last year. But I think like Matt and a few other ones have always been very supportive of it and being able to answer the questions we need to have for them. But the biggest thing is really, I mean, just like how do we just keep on top, stay in trends? I mean, there's so many beers out there, the New England milkshake, this and that. And, I mean, I'm sure you kind of similar have that with the different flavors I see, like the honey and different things like that. How do we stay on top of the trends and how do we make it worthwhile? So we're not.
Sometimes it's like, do you even want to stay on top of the trends? There was in Vegas, I saw a new whiskey that was peanut butter flavored. And I was just like, dear God.
I mean, I get like cinnamon, right?
It's
honey,
like if you want a
get
cocktail, make a damn cocktail.
Right. But I don't want to buy it, but I get it. Yeah. But I don't get. What was the flavor?
Peanut butter.
Peanut butter.
Yeah, I think like
peanut butter rum is actually not bad.
Yeah, I do have my 2 cents on that. I think because we've been asked like, oh, why aren't you putting out a hazy beer? Why aren't you putting out like it just goes on and on and on. And, and if you just look back over the last like 15 or 20 years, there's always a trend every about 3, 4, 5 years. There's a new trend that comes up, but then as quickly as it comes up, it goes away.
So
right?
flash in the pan.
Right.
So
Yeah,
these
it
are
really
kind of
is,
like,
because like if you go back a little bit, there was the ice train, right? So everybody had to have an ice. It was
and they're
Bud
gone
ice
now.
and red ice, and like just goes on and on. And then you move right out of that into a red. Everybody had to have a red, and then that's gone, and then it just goes on and on.
So it seems like there would be a lot of business spin-up costs too, right? You've got to advertise your new trendy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so staying
100%.
true to the original product and the brand is
Getting
been
them
a
all
lot of your
licensed by the TTB.
Right. Oh yeah, and
the label stuff.
I think sort of just keeping true to your brand and what you identify as a solid product and what you really want to showcase out there,
Right.
instead of something you're trying to jump on board with as quick as you can. But then by the time you're already on board, it's already like freaking gone.
Right.
So like,
Can't chase that
yeah,
fad.
no, and you can't chase them. And I've never attempted it. Like, it's just too crazy because, we have a variety of beers. We try to stay very true to like recipes we make.
Right.
We're one of the only breweries in Virginia that still use open fermenters, and that's pretty much unheard of in my industry. So we try to stay true to the original recipes and making those products as well as we possibly can to introduce people to those products, to say,
Gotcha.
actually, there are baselines to all these beers, opportunities for
The,
those beers.
And we do a similar thing. We've been asked countless times, why do we only make rye? Why don't we make bourbon?
Right.
Why don't we make scotch?
Right.
And I always tell them, scotch, well, I'll make it as soon as I move to Scotland.
Or bourbon you make as soon as you move to Kentucky.
Well,
right?
actually, you can make bourbon in any state in the U.S. as long as it's made from American corn. But the reason we make rye is because rye was Virginia's historic spirit, and we love that history. We love this product, and we just want to do one thing and just do it really, really well. And so like you said, I'm not making a Fireball clone with cinnamon flavoring.
Right.
And you don't need to.
That's for the cocktail.
Right. I'd probably make a lot more money if I did, but I'm sticking to my guns. We have principles. We want to make, something and just do it really well.
Yeah.
So you latched onto something about collaboration a second ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious about your impressions of this, all three of you. So I have, as a lawyer, been involved with some brand wars on behalf of at least the older distilleries and breweries all over the United States on both sides of the coin, enforcing and defending. So there are certainly conflicts between brands. I mean, I think we were saying earlier before the show that you can't pick a name like Funky Monkey Banana Beer. Somebody's already trademarked it or somebody's using it. 3 breweries already have a beer with whatever name you can come up with. Throw a mammal and a color on it, whatever it is. But somebody has that.
It's an adjective and a mammal. So
adjective and a mammal. Actually, you had an April Fool's joke, Matt, that I wanted to. Did you guys hear about this?
3 mammals.
The 3 mammals. My wife thought it was real too, but we saw it was a lost rhino, old ox, and ocelot.
Yep.
And that the 3 of you were joining to become 3 Mammals Brewing.
Brewery.
And
it was pretty ridiculous because we really took it to the next level. I don't know if that was a good thing or not, but we took it to the next level. So we had T-shirts made, banners, the whole thing. So people were really
you did
bought
a
into
press
it.
release. It was in the paper. I saw it. It's April 2nd today. It would have been great if we could have had the show yesterday and you could have re-announced well, 3 Mammals is back, and now we're going to be 3 mammals and some whiskey.
Yeah, well, and that was 3 years ago, and I still have people come in the tasting room looking for the T-shirts. That's how long ago.
You should make
it's
them.
Unbelievable.
Seems like
we were thinking about, just for fun, we were
custom ink.
Yeah, we were all going to have a different color for each brewery, but then we would have the T-shirts available just because people are ridiculous. So it was just, it was fun though. It was a lot of fun, and a lot of people bought into it. So,
so I digressed about the brand war. So tell me about that. So this collaboration, it sounds like locally you're getting help from Lost Rhino, and you go to other breweries. I don't know if there are any other distilleries that you work with.
There's another distillery in Loudon, Mount Defiance. They make
Mount Defiance. Sure.
absinthe and stuff like that. And we actually collaborate with them as well. So when we started, a few years ago, we were making an American agave spirit. You can't call it tequila, but it was an American agave spirit for Cochina down in Leesburg. And it was really neat, and it was fun. And we're good friends with Jason and Rebecca who own it. But it wasn't in our wheelhouse, right? It was like we weren't making any money doing it. It was like we can't spin up operations to support that when we're so busy doing this. And so we talked to Mount Defiance. We didn't want to leave Jason and Rebecca hanging. And so we talked to Mount Defiance, gave them the recipes, gave them all the artwork. everything, and trained them how to make it, and then turned that product over to them, and now they make it for them. So, the restaurant is happy because they still get the product they want, and they're actually growing with that. And we don't have to do it because we don't have time. So it was really nice collaboration.
But so where does that line end though? So you collaborate with Lost Rhino or with Mount Defiance, but Bear Republic or whatever, Stone or some other,
it's a little different in the distilling. There's not quite as many of us around.
True.
And it's not quite as, everybody's not quite as collaborative as they are in the beer industry, in distilling. So you kind of have to build that relationship first. So,
so it's more person to person than, hey, we're both
owner to owner.
Distillers.
Yeah. Hey, somebody just comes to me out of the blue asking me for a bunch of stuff. I'm like, man, I don't know you, but it's like, if I've got a nice relationship with somebody, I'll bend heaven and earth for them. But, there's a lot of people who just want to take advantage, and like, can I just have your business plan? And can I do all this? And it's like, no, you can't just do that. You got to do your own work, but I'm glad to give you advice and suppliers and things like that.
So you've been asked that before.
Oh, all the time.
I'm asked all the time.
So who's asking you guys?
We call them wannabes. They come in weekly.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous.
We've had
Where are they coming from? Just like public. Local guys, like, hey.
Usually it's guys who just love the dream and, oh man, we're going to do this. And they don't have a lick of money, experience, or work ethic. You know? So it's like, and in the early days, I would spend like 6 hours giving them a tour and walking them through this stuff. And then I realized these people aren't, like 90% of them are never going to amount to anything. And I'm wasting my time, right? Yeah. And so now we consult with people on a more professional basis. But I mean, we've had people come in and like go under our rope lines and go in the back and take pictures of equipment, steal yeast packets out of the trash.
Really?
All kinds of bad behavior.
Grief.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it puts you in a defensive mode, and I don't like to be that way. So with different distilleries in Virginia, and actually it's a lot easier to collaborate even outside of Virginia if they're 4 states away.
Right.
We have some very nice relationships with some other distillers.
But it's the wannabe. So what about you, Matt? Have you had a similar?
It's just like he said. It's constant. Like we do tours, for the brewery. And you can definitely tell on the tour because it's the guy taking the pictures of the pumps and taking pictures of the clamp, like, and unfortunately, it's all the background work that it takes to put this together.
Right.
You're not going to be able to do it just replicating some. It's not how it works. It's just not the way it functions. And again, it's the experience. It's these guys that are in some 9-to-5 job somewhere and they just want to jump ship and they have no experience, but they want to go right into production. And I'm like, guys, like there's a lot more to it than that. It's just a lot more deeply involved.
I can give you my business plan, but that's not going to make you successful.
Yeah, it certainly is
because
not.
the exercise of writing the business plan and thinking through those problems is what makes you successful.
Yeah.
Right. After I've written it, I can throw it away, right? Because it's all up here.
Right. You might have to share it with investors.
Yeah.
Thank you to our sponsor today, Dunlap Bennett & Ludwig. Dunlap Bennett & Ludwig solves complex business problems with smart solutions, acting as advocates and advisors to their clients with diverse professional backgrounds from MBAs to PhDs to bankers to military officers, real-world experience for real-world problems. Dunlap Bennett & Ludwig, doing better law. To find out more, visit www.dbllawyers.com. So what did Bear Chase do? You guys are 8 months old. How did you start up? Where did you go? I mean, it sounds like you went to Matt. Did you steal pictures of his stuff and try to sneak in? And
their facilities are a little different than mine. Yeah. So.
Bear Chase is a very different model than where Rhino is as a whole. Bear Chase, we're a farm brewery, and we started out a little bit different.
So what is a farm brewery? How is that different from I guess Lost Rhino is a brewery?
A
production brewery.
Correct.
And so what's the difference? What makes a farm brewery special?
We're currently growing right now. Last summer we attempted to grow hops. We failed miserably. But we're attempting to, we have fruit trees in the ground right now, and we will also be replanting in the next few weeks, hopefully some more hops in the ground as well to try it again. So we farm some of our own product.
That's what makes a farm brewery?
Yeah.
Not goats or...
Correct.
You don't need the animal part.
No, we don't need the animal part. It's just something that ingredients going into the beer.
Okay.
And so we started with trying to do hops, and then in the fall we planted. We actually have 42 trees in the ground right now.
So what your brewing process, how is that different from, say, Lost Rhinos? And I'm talking about kind of the business side of the brewery process, not like what vats do you have that are different, but if they're a production brewery and you're a farm brewery, is it volume? Is it quantity? Is it method?
Probably a little bit of everything on that one. Matt is his brew house is 2.5 times our size, and so he can produce a lot more out over there. You're 25 barrel, right? Yep. And so we're a 10 barrel system. So he's able to do it. He has the distribution. We're not going after distribution right now. Most of our beer is going to be done in house.
So you're venue focused.
Correct.
You're kind of selling through your venue.
Yep. The experience is, you go out and we're 33 acres. You have an amazing view of the entire Loudoun County area, brand new tasting room and all that. So it's really a nice experience.
You're by Bear's Den, right?
Right across the street. Yep. Awesome. Absolutely.
That's
right off
beautiful.
601 there.
Yeah.
And so Bear's Den looks over Clark County. We look over Loudoun County. And
that's pretty sweet.
Yeah. We hike up Bear's Den all the time.
And then you come over and have a beer. It's great.
Get some through hikers coming in to get hydration.
Yeah.
Right? Well, we are like 4 minutes sitting here in the studio from your brewery.
Yep.
I'll just maybe 5 minutes away.
We can go over there afterwards.
So,
right.
So other things that you guys would say to Bear Chase right now, it sounds like they're in a different space, but ultimately, are you looking to grow through distribution? Or are you looking to be more of an event center?
I wouldn't say an event center, but definitely more venue oriented versus trying to go out. We definitely want to have some distro down in the future, but we're still new. We're trying to figure out our seasons and how we're going to do and what we're going to do, and our core beers as well. We've identified a few of them, but we still want to see what else comes out over the next few months. So we're not really trying to get into that game just yet, but I would say, down the road, absolutely, be able to have something out there so we can have something going to fireworks, and so a little bit out there.
Gotcha. So you can sell kegs into some of the local restaurants.
For our perspective, and I think there are some similarities in the beer world. Some after you get a certain measure of success, distributors and places will start to come to you and want you, and it's very feels very good to the ego to have that happen, and so you're very inclined to say yes. And my only advice would be use caution, because once you're in some of those relationships, you're stuck in those relationships forever.
Forever.
Yeah. And so it's like, make sure, it's like if some very beautiful woman comes up and wants to marry me, it's like, well, might sound good at first, but she could be crazy, right? And so you've got to basically you got to realize you're getting married here, to this distributor. And so you've got to really make sure, how do they treat small guys? How do they deal with things? How do they pay? All those kinds of crazy things. Because, we've gotten into some relationships that have later, turned out to just be, wah.
Yeah, well, because so it's interesting. Every state in this country has something called a 3-tier system. Are you guys all familiar with the distribution?
Federal law, right?
Yeah, the federal. DC actually is exempt, oddly, which is kind of a neat thing that I know some people have taken advantage of. But tell us a little bit about your experience with this 3-tier system, because that's where the distributor relationship comes in. And we're doing this podcast to share with all these people that are sneaking under your ropes or taking pictures of your pumps and tanks. Sure. Hopefully they'll listen to the podcast and be like, I shouldn't do that. That's not cool. Right. I'm not going to make any friends that way.
Right.
And they've given me really good advice. And so what would your advice be about, first, do any of you want to share with us? I mean, what is your view of that 3-tier system? How does it work? And then how do you find a good distributor? How do you do that? How do you pick somebody once you have all these people coming to you?
I mean, so for liquor, it's different than beer. Let's just start with that right now.
Sure.
So everybody knows. And we do have a 3-tier system. So it means basically, the basic definition means that there's a separation of ownership between the manufacturer, the distributor, and the retailers. Okay, so that's bars, restaurants, liquor stores.
Right.
So that's the basic separation.
And you're not allowed to be both.
And not allowed to be, you couldn't be any two of the three. You can only be one.
Right.
Right.
Tied house rules.
Tied house rules, right. I can't send all my stuff to that place because I own it.
It's a good term to Google for listeners.
Yeah,
tied house rules. It is a complicated thing. We dealt with that with the Rhino Retreat.
And different states have different levels of enforcement severity. California and some states are really strict about it, and other states are a little more lax. But anyway, in the 3-tier system, it's interesting because we actually operate in Europe as well, and Europe has no 3-tier system. And so generally, most American distillers are like, oh, the 3-tier system, it's constraining. It causes me to have to do things I don't want to do, blah, 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 and I have to deal with distributors who I don't like, whatever. But there's a downside to not having it. In Europe, it's basically the wild, wild west. Anything goes, right? And so Like in America, it's very controlled. If I make a sale to a distributor in like Missouri, like we have a relationship and it's exclusive, and I can sell my product to him, and they sell my product, and nobody else is doing it for the most part. And then I can work him. So I have like 26 customers, 26 states, 26 customers that I have to deal with. So there's a scalability thing there. I don't have to deal with 26,000 restaurants in the U.S.
You deal with 26 distributors.
26 distributors, and I have a focal point, and I can go visit them,
restaurants.
One every 2 a month, and hit them all every year, right? So it's a scalability thing. In Europe, for instance, they also have distributors, and they have distributors that roughly align with countries. So there's a distributor for Germany, for Finland, for France, for UK, right? Different companies. And if I make a contract with, say, a German distributor, right?
Right.
And I tell them, okay, you can have my product, but only for Germany, right? Then I'm going to go into Poland, for instance, and make a deal in Poland and say, look, I want to sell Catoctin Creek in Poland, and you can have my product only for Poland. And they're like, okay, great. We all handshake. We might even sign some papers.
But you might not.
Then mysteriously, that distributor, like he wasn't selling enough of one of your SKUs, right? And so he's like, I got to get rid of this shit because I can't sell this. So they'll sell it on the cheap at a loss even to some little podunk distributor in Poland, right? And your stuff starts showing up in
so they start
Gdansk,
competing with your other distributor.
Right. Your stuff starts showing up in Gdansk, and your Polish distributor's like, hey, man, we had a deal. What the heck? And you're like, I didn't do it, and so there's this gray market.
Oh, boy.
And stuff starts to go around. You'll find stuff showing up in Slovenia.
And the U.S. distribution system prevents that.
And the U.S., it's illegal to do so.
Yeah.
And it's not in Europe. And so there's this gray market. So you do things where you try to, like if I send it to Germany, I either put a sticker or I make a special label that says, imported by, Have Distributing Company,
so you can trace
Bremen, Germany, right? And then it's like, look, those bottles in Gdansk have your name on it. What happened? Well, how'd that happen? You weren't supposed to do that.
Yeah, not for resale and other. Yeah,
right. So, and that's a partial solution.
Really interesting.
That whole example, by the way, it was not totally hypothetical. It wasn't us, but it was a different brand, a guy I was familiar with, a different whiskey brand.
So because I only hear belly aching about the 3-tier system. That's a really good, useful story to kind of encourage people to, the 3-tier system isn't that bad. I mean, we run into challenges. So Matt Lost Rhino has a Lost Rhino Retreat restaurant, and there was brewing in the restaurant, and that was a challenge. Matt, do you want to talk about how we dealt with that, or how you dealt with that?
Yeah, I mean, there were plenty of challenges because we were sort of the first to do it kind of thing, but there's now tons of restaurants that do it. But basically what I had to do is I had to pull a federal brewing permit for both locations. So I had one for the brewery and one for the restaurant. And then basically we were able to do a inter-transfer or a license to license transfer, which is, how we sort of got around that. But we ultimately wound up going back to the distributors just for ease and everything like that, because it really didn't make sense. Plus we were brewing at the retreat already. So we sort of share that, I guess, with our distributors. And then with I can do that on some of our off products, like, little products that distributors ultimately don't want to make, but that's how we had to sort of circumvent that. But that's a very rare case, and that's the only time I can do. There aren't any other alternatives. And then the other situation is that we actually have a county in Maryland, which it's the only county in the United States that has a 4-tier system. So, so if you really want to lose
Montgomery.
Montgomery County.
Yeah.
Oh, shocking.
Yeah.
No, not shocking.
Yeah.
Really?
So, we have to send it to Maryland. The Maryland sends it to the DLC is what they call it. And they're all taking profits along with that. That doesn't change. So by the time your beer gets to shelf in Montgomery County, it's 30 or 30, sometimes 40% more than everywhere else.
It's time to drive to PG County.
It is really ridiculous that system still exists over there. It's like a little mini Virginia ABC running in MoCo.
It's pretty amazing.
They've got to pay the people to do it, I guess.
Yeah,
that's what they're
pretty amazing.
In the spirits world, it's a little bit more complicated. There are these little county regionalities that you have to deal with, but they have, of the 50 states that we have in the U.S., they're roughly divided into thirds. 1/3 of the U.S. states are what are known as basically true free market states, like Maryland, where it is absolutely free market. You can make whatever deals you can make with distributors. And if you sign contracts or not, you're bound by contract law. But, in some cases you have a handshake agreement. If they don't work out, you can leave them. And if they don't like your product, they can drop you. So it's true free market. And that's probably the best
It's
model.
all by contract, in other words.
Yeah. It's all by contract, verbal or otherwise. And then another third of the states are what's called control states, where it's a state government controlling the sale of liquor, either a little bit or a lot. So in Virginia, it's complete control. They run the liquor stores. It's like a Soviet grocery store. These are hourly employees that work for the state government, right?
That's why they look like Soviet liquor stores.
I give the ABC credit because the stores have come a long way. They've really been modernizing and making them nice and all that. Much more than they were 20 years ago when it was like, here's your liquor from behind the counter, like a pharmacy almost.
Yeah.
So those control states, then you're dealing with the state government. Now, the benefit of a control state is that they are usually extremely reliable. They pay on time. It's usually automated. So that's a good...
Because the government's paying you for your liquor and collecting.
Right, and you basically just sign up like a government contract, and then you get auto deposits in your bank account.
But there's limited shelf space and limited distribution points.
That's everywhere.
Okay.
That's everywhere. So, but a private contractor, you might sometimes have to chase payments, and be like, look, you're 30 days over, we need to get that money or else we're not going to ship again, things like that. So you don't deal with that with control states. The third category are what we call franchise states. And that's almost everything that beer has to deal with, I think. But the franchise states, basically, it's like you can have a verbal agreement or not, but you are bound for life
to that
with that distributor.
Yeah, that is like beer.
Unless they mutually agree to let you go, which they never do, right? Because they're going to keep you as a playing card that they can trade for somebody else down the road. Or someday you turn into Tito's, then they want to have the rights. So some of them are brand collectors, and they have no intention of selling your product, even an ounce of it, right? We have a franchise state that we sell 0 cases a month in. Over and over and over again. It's like, why did you take us on?
Because the distributor's holding on to you?
Because they have no interest, right? Unless they get incentivized to sell your product. And that incentivized has dollar signs.
Or trade for another brand, which, I got caught up in that down in Richmond when Stone came in. Like, my brand was traded a couple of times and, I had no control over it whatsoever.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So what would you say to Chris then about distributors? Lessons from this, like the brand trading, like how would you pick your distributor?
Yeah.
How would you vet them?
The first time we go into a market, I guess, is the best thing to do is go out into the restaurant world and see how the restaurants are being taken care of by the distributors. I think that's important because you really get feedback from the ground of like what's actually going on in the marketplace.
Their sales guys are jerks, or no, we like them. They come all the time.
Yeah, right.
So you go talk to the restaurant owners, like you would go to Fireworks or something and say, hey, how does you guys buy Lagunitas or Lost Rhino or who's their distributor and what,
You also would want to ask them, the distributor, before you make a relationship, what's your book? Let me see your book. What's your catalog of all the things? You don't want to fly
by night.
Oh, yeah. If, like, for instance, we went to mega big distributor, those guys aren't salespeople. They're order takers, right? So they're going in, how many cases of Grey Goose do you want today? And this kind of stuff. They're not coming in and saying, this was a handcrafted product and da-da-da-da-da, and spending 10 minutes telling a story. So you got to have a salesman who knows how to sell instead of a salesman who's just going in like a Cisco food rep, okay, how many things of olive oil do you want today?
A giant book might not be right for your microbrew or
for a small company like all of ours.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you see a book that, they've got a few tequilas and they got a couple nice rums, they don't have a whole lot of whiskey here, that's a good fit for us, So a small focused book, but not too small where they don't have any people on the streets either,
So next topic that I just kind of want to get a couple sound bites about is brands, like protecting your brand, your trademarks. Like, when do you do that? I know you just got your trademarks, and we've been fighting and protecting your brands. That your lawyers have been protecting them for years, and some of the battles have been vicious.
Yeah.
But what kind of strategy do you come up with? So just to set the backdrop, the United States has a system where you can reserve a brand, a mark on the register ahead of time. And I know distilling, maybe not so much if you're not doing cinnamon whiskeys or coming up with kind of I won't call it flash in the pan, but not coming up with new product all the time.
Right.
But brewing seems to me that all brewing people or breweries are coming up with new names, like just new beer names and new, like, we're going to do Hefeweizen with cherries and, mix it and and age it in whiskey barrels.
That
So
sounds
there's a
good. You
collaboration,
should do
by
that.
the way.
Yeah, right. That sounds real good.
We had do you guys know Dan Stiles?
Mhm.
Yeah, so Dan brewed something at what was that? The beach place, McDowell's.
No,
Back in the day in whiskey barrels, some kind of like peach beer or something. And I took a new hire over there with one of my law partners, David Ludwig, you guys know. And we had one glass and we were lit because they had just tapped it. They'd never tapped it before. And it was like 40% alcohol. Had no idea. It tasted like peach juice, essentially.
Yeah, right.
So interesting collaboration. I don't know how
Yeah.
completely legal it was to sell that, but I was pretty impressed with the product. I feel like that should be more common.
We actually have a very in-depth barrel aging program
Oh, you
at
do?
the brewery. Yeah. So we use whiskey barrels, we use wine barrels. It depends on, because our barrels, they were getting harder and harder to find. So a lot of them come out of Bowman's down in Fredericksburg. But then we have a group down in Kentucky that we work with that helps us. Basically, he's a contractor, but he goes out and finds the barrels for us. And then
So do whiskey barrels run out of use?
Yeah, we can only by law use them once by federal law.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
I have a bunch of barrels for you. If you want barrels?
Awesome.
You
Yeah.
just come and
Sounds
see me.
that's
I
good.
will.
Yeah.
I'll make a price that's good for you.
No,
We
I
actually have
appreciate
beer in his barrels now.
that. Oh, awesome.
So-
So
Yeah,
we can only use barrels
Look at
once
that,
in
man. Which
whiskey.
made your podcast business.
Yeah, right. No, absolutely.
The whiskey law says that whiskey has to go into a new barrel every single time in the U.S. And so 90% of all Scotch is aged in used American bourbon casks because of that. Because Scotland is a country with lots of whiskey and no trees.
I remember touring the bourbon distilleries and they use casks they buy from other people as well for bourbon.
Yeah, well, all bourbon goes into a new casket first, but there's always second finishes and things like
that's
that.
what that is,
So,
right.
So,
the
and
age-
that's a big trend lately, finish it in a rum cask. People then think it was only in a rum cask. No, it's got to go into that fresh virgin cask at least
Okay.
at the beginning.
And then that's how they get like the port wine finish.
Right.
Okay.
So you're finishing it. It's like polishing.
Yeah.
You've got the basic, statue made and you're just polishing it at the end.
Have you had that Belvini port wine finish? It's pretty
I've
good.
had everything,
It's
yeah,
pretty
pretty
mellow.
much.
Yeah. So talking back about the brand war, so what comments or advice do you have? Bear Chase just got its brand, but if you monitoring, should you be watching the trademark register? Should you be watching other users in California or in other states? But what level? How do you approach those users? I mean, what have your experiences been?
We, absolutely, minimally, you have to trademark everything, right?
Right.
I mean, you have to. We had, some skirmishes, I would say. I'm not allowed to talk about the details of those skirmishes, but the, what it always comes down to is somebody comes along, in our case, a name that we trademarked and they want to use it, right? Because they like it. And it's like, and in some cases they're doing something very similar to what you're doing. And in other cases, they're not. And you have to decide how close is it to what you're doing? Is it going to dilute what you're doing? And, the Old Ox Red Bull thing was ridiculous, right? That's too far.
Yeah.
But, if a
Too far on the part of Red Bull.
right, agreed,
They
agreed.
over-enforced,
Totally agree.
right? Yeah.
Right. But
It's great for Old Ox, though.
right. But
No
for,
PR is bad
for
PR
us,
sometimes.
like if somebody comes along and they're making a distilled spirit, right?
Mhm.
That's the same class, that's the same category as what we're doing. Like there's a Catoctin Creek fly rod. They make fishing poles. I don't care about that.
Right, that makes
Custom
sense.
motorcycles. I don't care about that. Right? That's a regional thing. But if they're making whiskey, they can't use it.
Catoctin beer, they probably couldn't use it either, right?
Right.
Because
So-
it's this consumer.
And the thought
Right.
is that people have the perception that they are the same thing as you, and they're getting benefit from what the work you've done, right? And so
Right.
you can't let them do that.
Or
Plus
that
you've
they're
gotta
going to dilute and harm your brand by
Exactly.
selling an inferior
Right.
product. So
the most cases we send a cease and desist, and they desist. And we had one that went to court, and it got ugly, and then we settled, and spent a lot of money that we wish we hadn't spent.
but you still have your brand.
But we still have a brand, and we won in that case, And it all comes down to, we had the trademark, you can't use it, it's
Yeah.
ours.
And so Matt, you've had that same experience
plenty of times,
a lot of
unfortunately.
times,
Yeah.
right? Almost
Lots.
monthly for 10
Yeah, it's
years.
pretty much monthly. Yeah.
So question about that. You're collaborative with a lot of breweries. You're helping Bear Chase. I know you've helped other breweries start and continue. How do you deal with infringers? What's your strategy for when you see somebody starts a brewery in, say, Delaware or Wyoming, and they're like, hey, we're Faceplant Stout and your Faceplant IPA, and they just start it and they don't say anything to you, what's your initial? What do you do for?
Well, I mean, like I said, we are collaborative in nature, so I have plenty of times like sent out a letter, a nice letter, just saying, "Hey guys, you're on the radar. We need to see if we can work something out, run through your production, and then be done with it." More of that stance instead of just jumping right in, because for me, there's too many.
Right.
So it would exhaust all of our funding if we're
lawyers are just too expensive.
Yeah. Indeed.
But you try the collaborative approach.
Yeah,
first.
we try the collaborative approach, but usually, unfortunately, I'll either not get a response or they'll just blow me off, whatever.
You'll have to have a lawyer send a letter.
Yeah. So then we sort of move into the next stage. We send a lawyer, and then if we don't get any traction there and they continue, then we sort of move into the next phase. So it's been challenging to say the least, because we've been around for a long time, and we've had 4,000 breweries come on board since I've been in operations.
Yeah.
So, and unfortunately, these guys don't even they do a quick Google search, and they're like, they're not.
Or they just say, we're going to be different enough, or we're far away enough.
Right.
We really like the brand and we just want to use it,
Right.
even though they already have it.
Right.
I think there have even been cases that I've seen with some breweries where the other brand said, well, you guys are just so successful, and we'd like to use part of your name because it'll help us get started.
That's a great case in court.
Yeah. Sure,
it's a good case for you to win.
Right.
Right.
So opposite problem, getting a letter from somebody that says, hey, you're using a brand that we have a problem with. Has that happened before to you guys? Or
no.
So I guess the takeaway is be on the front end, get your trademarks and be the enforcer, not the enforcee.
Right.
If you're starting a new brewery, do your due diligence and get your trademarks first. Because I think some of that process bakes in reviewing and making sure you're not using anybody else's mark, and you're not going to get that letter and spend all that money to change your brand.
We had a local restaurant that for a brief time they wanted us to do a private label for their restaurant, and I won't say which restaurant. Great place, great guys, but they had a concept and they wanted to call it something loco for Loudoun County, and it's like, Four Loko is a beverage, right? Like no, you can't use loco, and I think that basically killed it for me. They were really intent on calling this product like loco something, and I was like, well, we're going to have to own it. We're going to have to trademark it, and
you're going to
that's never going to happen, right? We were going to put out a product called Grey Ghost at one time, right? And that's too close to Grey Goose, right? Grey Ghost is the nickname for John Mosby, and but it's too close.
It's
too close.
But Grey Goose. So that's the other thing that's interesting, I think, with that comment. If Grey Goose was a small private label vodka in Oregon or something like that, you could probably beat Grey Ghost and fight them. But Grey Goose has more money than God.
Exactly.
And they're going to fight you even if they're not on the side of right. So that's another balancing
more
factor.
than just it's what it should be or what should be allowed or whatever. It's like also practical economics, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of that, I think, in every industry, but when the margins are tight in the distilling and brewing industry, probably top. So I want to take a quick second with each of you to plug. And Chris, if you want to go first, can you tell us about Bear Chase, plug what products you're doing, what makes it special, and just want to share that with the podcasting audience who might drive by the western part of Loudoun County or be at Dulles Airport and want to take a break.
Absolutely. So we're 8 months old. We opened last August. Official grand opening was September of last year. And we're a 35-acre farm brewery. Right on the very farthest western Loudoun County we could possibly go. As soon as you're on the road to our
Your
brewery.
mountain. You're on the top of a mountain, aren't you?
We are, yeah. We're right off the Route 601 and Blue Ridge Mountain Road, right down the street from FEMA. And so we get a lot of those individuals coming up and down, and then the hikers. Secret people, absolutely. And then
can't know what's up there.
We don't. We stopped asking too. It was easier
because they tell you not to ask. Yeah,
I think if you ask too many times, they have to report you.
Do the Blackhawks fly over your brewery too?
I was told I'm not allowed to talk about that anymore.
They fly right up. They fly within 10 feet of this place.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we have 16 beers on tap. We've identified about 6 or 7 core beers that we want to have. We are traditional beers. We're not really the ones that have all that funky, weird stuff in the beer. We really like to try traditional. One of our best sellers is a High Point Helles. High Point Helles is a light, crisp, easy drinking lager. And then also we have Mr. Blonde and Mr. Pink, which is a blonde ale and a cherry blonde ale.
Did you trademark the labels yet?
I will have to get back to you on that one.
We'll have to take care of that. Okay. So, Matt, you want to tell us a little bit about Lost Rhino? And I know Lost Rhino is Party Central, Band Central. You're on the trail.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we've been around for a while. We're very fortunate to sort of be in the first brewery into Loudoun County after post Old Dominion, but we're very fortunate to pick up the equipment from Old Dominion. So our brew house actually has been brewing beer since 1989. So we've been very fortunate to be able to sort of grow that.
You were at Old Dominion before, right?
Yeah, I was there for 8 years. Yeah. Went to school originally for mechanical engineering and got sucked into brewing. So
all these engineers, they seem to be the successful.
Engineering sucks. Nobody wants to stay there.
Yeah,
but it seems like you can transition into
it's
a
the
career.
drafting behind the table. I'm like, this is not what I wanted to like. Like I love doing it, but like I couldn't do that. But so we've been we have our 8-year anniversary coming up, so we're pretty excited about that in a couple of months actually. Lost Rhino, we're a production brewery, but we have a full scale tasting room, and we have a kitchen built into it. So come there, have pretzels. We also have it was by accident. So I have a pincade now, which I didn't think was going to be a thing, but it is a thing. A pincade is a collection of pinball machines.
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
Yeah, so we have 9 now, and it's a lot of fun. People love coming out and playing it. There's leagues. I had no idea it even existed anymore, frankly, because it's one of those things where you can't have it at home usually. Like everybody has the consoles, but like they don't have that. So that's a lot of fun. We do, we do bands on Fridays and Saturdays. We do trivia.
So what's your lead product? What's your famous beers?
So Faceplant accounts for about 70% of all my production. Okay. So it's Faceplant IPA, and then we are traditional as well. So we have a Keller Hefeweizen, so it's made in the traditional German way in open fermentation. The whole deal that just rolled out. We get a new release tomorrow, which is an Imperial Red that is called Matt's West Coast Refuge. That was mine. I actually brew beer too, believe it or not. It sounds real scary, but I do it, and not as often as I would like to, but. And then we have Vinyl Night, which has become real popular too. Yeah. So Vinyl Night's on Tuesdays.
I want to try that Imperial Red though.
Yeah, the Imperial Red. It really turned out very nice.
Very cool.
I'm very happy with it. A little higher on the alcohol side, but very fortunate to have it. So so we're a traditional brewery, and like I said, we Bear Chase has the $1 million views. I've got the $1 view of my parking lot. But
you posted a new post. You have your upgrade.
Yeah, no, I did it as a fun. It was fun. So you guys did see it. Yeah, we did a little April Fool's joke. So yesterday, because we hear like obviously they're like, yeah, we're going out for the view and everything. I'm like, well, look at our view, guys. Like, got all the cars and the Comcast trucks trying to drive people. Like it's just so. I have a very good Photoshop guy in house, like very scary good, and he took some of the pictures, the views up there, and put them in our tasting room.
So if my kids want to go to college, do you think he could put their heads on people who row and play soccer?
Indeed. But he's really good at what he does. So anyway, so it was a lot of fun just to very cool. Collaborate with the community. And again, I do want to go back to a quick remark. The first beer that I had on before I couldn't even carry beer, because we do support the industry, was Port City. So Port City was my direct competition, but I put them on, and then I just had Fair Winds on last week.
So you put them on tap in your room.
Yeah, I put them on tap in the tasting room.
Port City is going to be here today with us. We're probably going to interview Mr. Butcher separately when he shows up. He is running a little late.
Bill's beer was the first beer that we had on at the brewery.
Fantastic.
So I think that, and then, we try to do that. We did it with House 6. We did it with Fair Winds most recently. So we try to keep a few lines open just to show that we support the community as a whole.
That's great.
Ultimately, they have to have a good experience, whether they're at our facility, at your facility, like anywhere they go.
Well, so you're going to get some kegs, I think, from Scott, and you're going to have Bear Chase on tap soon.
No.
Yeah,
As a
whenever.
promotional thing.
Yeah, no, and we do it, so it's a lot of fun. It makes it fun. So,
Scott, do you want to tell us about Catoctin Creek and why people want to come and what your product
so
showcase?
When Becky and I started the company, we wanted to make a type of whiskey that was, for the most part, forgotten about. Most people don't realize, in Virginia, as one of the original colonies, after the Revolutionary War, rye whiskey was the predominant spirit. Before the Revolutionary War, we were all Brits, and so everybody was drinking rum. But after the war, the Brits got kind of pissed off with us for having a war with them, and they cut off the supply of sugar and rum to us. And so Americans had to look inward for their spirituous beverages.
Yeah.
And so what we had was lots and lots of land. We had lots and lots of grain, and the grain that was predominant in this area was not corn, but rye. So rye was growing in Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, all the way up into Quebec. And it was this northern East Coast rye.
Sweeter, right?
It's sweet. It's not as sweet as wheat, but it has a little bit of a spicy taste to it. And bourbon comes along much later as Americans start to settle into what's the Ohio River Valley and Kentucky and all that stuff.
We need to get that
original
message out.
Absolutely, that's what
Rye's
we're doing.
The original
That's
American.
what we're doing.
All right.
So Becky and I, nobody
original
knew
American
that, right?
whiskey.
People are still learning that. And it's like, why do we make rye whiskey? Because that's what was made in the 1800s in this state. This is what's important here. And people say, why don't you make bourbon? It's like, well, if I wanted to, I'd move to Kentucky. That wasn't regionally important here. There's nothing that prevents me from doing it.
Right.
But we want to tell this story. And so when we go to places, like I was in Vegas and I was at liquor stores in Vegas, and I'm like, and I present my bottle and I say, this is a Virginia rye. And they're like, that's odd. What's that? I know what Kentucky bourbon is, but what's a Virginia rye? And I say, well, that means it was made from grain in this area, and it was distilled in a pot still. And those are two very important things that make this very unique in that space. And then they taste it and they're like, oh, wow, this is really good. It tastes amazing, And so, a lot of people don't realize George Washington, our first president, was a distiller at Mount Vernon. And
I've been in his distillery.
Yep.
Have you been?
They
reconstructed it.
I've distilled there. So
it's
has Becky.
Fantastic, yeah.
He was the largest commercial distiller in his lifetime. And so distilling, the father of our country was a distiller, and that's an important message.
He was an engineering distiller, because I remember he brought that special stone from France or something, the giant, right?
The millstone.
The millstone, yeah. Put a lot of money into his distilling.
He was a very smart guy. He had some very unique things. He built his distillery below the level of the river, and then he piped the river in for the cooling water into his distillery. So it's brilliant. It's free water. Like, it's so wonderful. So, this rye whiskey, basically, it's a single barrel rye made from local grain, lovingly pot stilled. So most distilleries in America are column stills, which is essentially a refinery process that's run automatically 24/7, but not us. We're a batch process. We are obstinately inefficient, we like to say. Becky tastes every spirit every 5 minutes coming off the still and babies it through the system. So there's an enormous amount of care that goes into making this.
Becky's pretty trashed.
Yeah. No, her liver's like this big. But and then we age it in these barrels for a number of years, and then hand taste the barrels to make sure they're ready to be bottled, and then bottle it. So that's the amount of care that goes into these products.
So for today, I want to thank Scott and Matt and Chris for joining us. Catoctin Creek, Lost Rhino, and Bear Chase, and the products that we want everybody to remember is American Rye Whiskey from Catoctin Creek, and the Faceplant IPA from Lost Rhino, and then Bear Chase's Hellas.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
All right. So everybody go to these places. The venues are actually fantastic. Even Matt's parking lot. It's a fun place. The pinball machines. It's actually a party central. Beautiful views at Bear Chase. And then Catoctin Creek, my feeling when you're there is that it feels very authentic. It's in Old Town, Purcellville, Virginia. Very worth visiting. Thanks, guys, for coming. Appreciate it. And when Bill joins us, we'll edit him in and ask him some of the same stuff. But thanks for coming out.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
And thanks again to Matt Suarez of Bear Chase Brewery, Matthew Hagerman of Lost Rhino Brewing, and Scott Harris from Catoctin Creek Distillery. We had a boozy show with great boozy guests. We learned a lot today. Please download this podcast from wherever you get your podcasts, the other episodes on iTunes podcasts or the Android Google Play Store. Find us on YouTube at BlackLetter Podcast. And finally, don't forget to visit our website at BlackLetter Studio to see our other great shows, videos, and accompanying material. Thanks again for joining us.